Hi everyone, Mrs. Tourtelot here. So today we are going to talk about where writers get their ideas from. And the book we're going to read is called Finding Winnie, the true story of the world's most famous bear. So we know this is non-fiction. We know this is a real story because in the subtitle it says the true story. So we know this is a story about a real bear, but it tells us how the writer of Winnie the Pooh, A. Milne, it tells us how he got the idea to write books like this, The House at Pooh Corner. So this is a Winnie the Pooh book. And we know that Winnie the Pooh is a made-up fictional bear, right? How do we know Winnie the Pooh isn't real? Let me think. He sings songs, he's friends with a pig, he talks to an owl. So he's not a real bear, right? But there was a real bear named Winnie who gave this author the idea for his book. So we're going to find out how these two bears connect. And actually, this book, it's kind of like a story inside another story. So as I read, see if you can figure out how the three different stories fit inside each other. So this is Finding Winnie, the true story of the world's most famous bear. And it's written by Lindsay Matlick and illustrated by Sophie Blackall. Finding Winnie. Remember, everything in this book is true. This is a non-fiction book, so it means it all actually happened. Could you tell me a story? Asked Cole. It's awfully late. It was long past dark and time to be asleep. What kind of story? You know, a true story, one about a bear. We cuddled up close. I'll do my best. So this is the author of the book, and she's telling her son a story. A very long time ago, about 100 years before you were born, there was a veterinarian who lived in Winnipeg, in Canada. His name was Harry Colburn. A vegetarian, said Cole. Bear doesn't like vegetables. A veterinarian. It means an animal doctor. I know that, Cole said. That's maybe what I'm going to be when I'm big. If a horse had the hiccups or a cow had a cough, Harry knew how to make them feel just right. Harry's hands were never cold, even in Winnipeg, where winters are so frosty that icicles grow on the insides of your nose. That's just the kind of doctor he was. But a day came when Harry had to say goodbye to Winnipeg. There was a war far, far away, beyond the end of the country and on the other side of the ocean, and he was going to help. He would be caring for the soldiers' horses. So do you know what war this might be? A war where they still had horses instead of tanks on the other side of the ocean. That means it was a war in Europe with horses. It's World War I. If you guessed that, you were right. Harry rode east on a train full of other soldiers. He leaned his head against the window, watching the land scroll by, wondering what it would be like to be so far from home. The train rolled right through dinner and over the sunset and around 10 o'clock and into a nap and out the next day until it stopped at a place called White River. Harry decided to stretch his legs. On the train platform was a man on a bench with a baby. A baby, said Cole, annoyed. He doesn't want a story about a baby. A baby bear. A bear cub. Harry stopped. It's not every day that you see a bear cub at a train station. That bear has lost its mother, he thought, and that man must be the trapper who got her. What do trappers do? Asked Cole. It's what trappers don't do. They don't raise bears. Raise them? You know, I said, love them. Do you know what trappers do? Trappers are a kind of hunter. So this man must have been a hunter. So he doesn't want a baby bear, but he doesn't know what to do with it. Harry thought for a long time. Then he said to himself, there is something special about that bear. He felt inside his pocket and said, I shouldn't. He peeled back and forth and said, I can't. Then his heart made up his mind, and he walked up to the trapper and said, I'll give you $20 for the bear. Is $20 a lot? Asked Cole. What do you think? Is $20 a lot? Back then, $20 was a lot of money. Back then, it was more than a lot, his mummy said. So there he goes. He's buying the bear. Captain Colburn, said the colonel on the train as the little bear sniffed at his knees, we are on a journey of thousands of miles, heading into the thick of battle, and you propose to bring this most dangerous creature? Bear stood straight up on her hind legs, as if to salute the colonel. The colonel stopped speaking at once, and then, in a quite different voice, he said, Oh, hello. The men of Harry's regiment squeezed by to have a look. I've decided to name her Winnipeg, Harry told them, because remember, he's from a town called Winnipeg in Canada. So he's going to name her Winnipeg, so we'll never be far from home. Winnie for short. So Winnie is short for Winnipeg. They had a very long way to travel, and they had already gone 3 or 4 feet when Winnie grew hungry. What do bears eat? The men wondered. What don't they eat? Said Harry. Vegetables, Cole reminded me. Winnie ate vegetables. I said she ate everything except onions. They brought her carrots and potatoes and apples and tomatoes and eggs and beans and bread and a tin of fish and some slop in a dish. But Winnie was still hungry. How about dessert? Said Harry, holding up a bottle of condensed milk. Taking the treat in her paws, Winnie lay on her back and hummed a happy song as she drank. The men roared with laughter. So after you've listened to this story, make sure you click on the link where I've posted some photographs of the real Winnie, because you will see a picture of the soldiers actually feeding Winnie like this. Harry and Winnie gathered with soldiers from all over Canada in the green fields of Valcartier. A whole city of tents had sprung up there. One was a hospital for horses, where Harry went to work. So remember, they're going into battle, but this is before they have tanks to go into battle. So the men, the soldiers, ride on horses instead. So somebody has to take care of the horses. Winnie was in the army now. Harry taught her to stand up straight and hold her head high and turn this way and that just so. Soon she was assigned her own post. Even the colonel agreed that Winnie was a remarkable bear. She might have been the best navigator in the whole army. If you hid something, could she find it? She could. What if it was farther away? And further still? Remarkable, he cried. You can see they've created a little course for her where she has to find apples. In the evenings, both of them were too tired to move. When Harry thought about Winnie and the voyage across the ocean, his head said, I shouldn't. His head said, I can't. But his heart made up his mind. Have you ever been in a situation like that where your head is saying one thing? So your head kind of says the sensible thing, right? The thing you know you really should do. But then your heart says the thing you really want to do. What do you think his heart is deciding? Nobody had ever tried to float so many people and animals across the Atlantic Ocean before. 30 ships sailed together, carrying about 36,000 men and about 7,500 horses, and about one bear named Winnie. Can you see Winnie on the boat there? So they are in North America, and they have to get on a boat. They have to go all the way over the Atlantic Ocean to get to Europe. because that's where the First World War is taking place. So they are on their way to Europe. So Winnie's on the boat. When they finally arrived in England, that's where I'm from, England. When they finally arrived in England, the regiment went to training on the Salisbury Plain, where it rained and rained and rained. It does rain a lot in England, I can tell you that. But Winnie didn't seem to mind the rain. She was the mascot of the 2nd Canadian Infantry Brigade, and she attended her post with vigor. One day, Harry came running while she was doing her exercises in the tent. "You'll bring the whole place down," he said with a laugh. She had grown. It was winter when the order came. The time had come to fight. Winnie posed proudly with the men for pictures to send home to their families. Harry thought for a long time. His head argued one way and then the other, but his heart made up his mind again. He went to Winnie and said in a serious way, "There's somewhere we need to go." Winnie brushed the mud off her nose and nuzzled in close. So this picture here, make sure you look again at the link that I sent you because you'll see the real version of this picture that was taken. All right, so the fighting is about to begin. They're about to go off and fight in the war. And now Harry has another decision to make. And his head's saying one thing and his heart's saying the other. So he has to decide whether to bring Winnie with him. What do you think? What do you think his heart is saying this time? Harry drove all the way to the big city. They're in England, so the big city is London. "Here we are," said Harry, "the London Zoo." Harry took a deep breath. "Winnie, this is going to be your home for a while." She tilted her head. "We're shipping out to France," he explained. "I have to take care of the horses at the front." She rested her big head against him. "I know you want to come, but it's not safe." Winnie's head bowed. Harry's hands were warm as sunshine, as usual. "There is something you must always remember," Harry said. "It's the most important thing, really. Even if we're apart, I'll always love you. You'll always be my bear." So this time, even though his heart really wanted him to bring Winnie with him, he knew that it wasn't safe. So it wasn't safe for him to bring her to war, but he couldn't put her back in the wild. Why couldn't he put Winnie back in the wild, do you think? Because she didn't grow up in the wild, right? She doesn't know how to survive. So she couldn't really survive in the war because that's not safe for a bear, and she couldn't survive in the wild. So the only thing he could think of was to find her a good home in a good zoo. Is that the end? That's the end of Harry and Winnie's story, I said. But I don't want it to be over, said Cole. Sometimes, I said, you have to let one story end so the next one can begin. How do you know when that will happen? You don't, I said, which is why you should always carry on. Remember how I said this is a story inside a story? Inside a story? Here we go. Once upon a time. Hey, wait. When do we normally hear those words? At the beginning of a book, right? But we're halfway through. This must be another story. But remember, still, everything in this book is true, so even this story is true. Once upon a time, there was a little boy with a stuffed bear. He'd had this bear ever since he was a baby, but somehow the boy had never found the right name for him. He'd tried Teddy and Edward and even Big Bear. One day, the boy went to visit the London Zoo with his father, and there was a bear, a real bear, on the terraces there. Right away, the boy thought, there is something special about that bear. Her name was Winnie. They became true friends. The boy was allowed to come right inside her enclosure to play. I don't think they let people do that in the zoo anymore, but back then, this was about 100 years ago, so back then their rules were a little bit different. Once the boy had found Winnie, he knew just what to call his stuffed bear. He named it Winnie the Pooh, and the boy was called Cole? Guessed Cole? The boy was called Christopher Robin Milne. So did you know that Christopher Robin was based on a real boy named Christopher Robin? Christopher Robin would visit Winnie at the zoo, and then he would take his stuffed animal on all sorts of adventures in the wood behind his home. His father, Alan Alexander Milne, wrote books all about Christopher Robin and Winnie. Harry's Winnie became Winnie the Pooh, and there has never been a more beloved bear. But what about Harry? Cole asked. Okay, so we got a family tree here. So it gets a little complicated here, so see if you can keep up with this. When Harry visited Winnie at the zoo after the war, he saw how happy she was. She was being raised. She was truly loved. And that was all he had ever wanted from the moment they met at the train station. So after the war, Harry returned to Winnipeg in Canada and to his life as an animal doctor. Before long, Harry was married and had a son named Fred. So there's Harry the vet. He has a son named Fred. And then Fred grew up and had a daughter named Laureen. And then Laureen grew up and had a daughter named Lindsay. And Lindsay wrote this book. And then Lindsay had a son named Cole. And she says, so Lindsay says, when I saw you, I thought, there is something special about this boy. So I named you after your great-great-grandfather, Captain Harry Colburn. I named you Cole. So Cole, the little boy, who is the son of the author, is the great-great-grandson of Harry Colburn. So that's the third story. So we got the story of the bear, and then we've got the story of Winnie the Pooh, and then we've got the story of how this book came to be written. Whoa, story inside a story inside a story. That's me, said Cole in a whisper. That's you. And that's Winnie? Yes, I said, that's Winnie. And it's all true? Sometimes the best stories are, I said. Cole's eyes grew big, and he said nothing for a long time. Then he hugged his own bear close and let out a yawn that reached far away, and they both turned over and fell asleep. The end. Now, at the end of the book, this is going to be a little hard to see, but you can see there's a photograph of the real Captain Colburn. Here's a picture of the diary he kept, and it shows on August 24th, 1914, bought bear, $20. And you can see here some real photographs of Harry with the bear, and then a statue of Harry and Winnie that is now at London Zoo. I posted all these photographs on a link for you so you can get up close and see these, because it's really fun to see the real photographs that this book was based on, including a real picture of the real Christopher Robin. And there's the author, and there is her son. So there we go. I hope you like this book. It's one of my favorites. That's Finding Winnie by Lindsay Mattick. See you soon.